Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 8 of Shot of Nostalgia, where we're doing that deep dive straight through 1995 ECW. I'm good old Mike Belcaster, and always my good old partner in crime.
It's the birthday boy today, live from the No Sale Studios. It's the Ace of the Tavern, Stephen ACEFIELD. It's January 6th, and you know what? The getting's good. I am ripe old age of 34 now. Dude, I'm very happy to celebrate my birthday here with you, doing what we love, covering ECW 1995.
Happy birthday, Ace. Dude, 34 don't feel too bad. So I hope you have a great one. I hope your day's been treating you fucking amazing. Yeah, man, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else either.
Hell yeah, man. And this is the 8th episode out of 11. As Mike Belcaster so eloquently said before, we're going to be covering HEATWAVE, Rage in the Cage 1995. We're going to go through all the results of Hardcore TV. Of course, we're going to dive deep into Dave Meltzer's newsletter. And we just freshly watched this. And I got a question for you. I know you probably watched Wrestling Tonight, the debut that happened on Monday night. Myself and Chad, guys, check it out on the Turnbuckle Tavern, only streaming. What were your thoughts on Dave's raves? We had Meltzer a little love on a different show this week.
Dude, you know what? It's good to see him getting across the Turnbuckle Tavern board. The one day I will be surprised is when we start seeing some Meltzer love on long balls. I know the 2 and 2 don't go hand in hand, but I'm sure there's some football news somewhere down the line that would be tied into it. It would be fantastic. But hell yeah, man. Such a great debut show. I was super pumped for the future. Monday nights are changing down at the tavern, brother.
And as we promised, guys, we're going to try to trim it down to an hour. Chad and I got together after the show. Went an hour 40, so we're going to try to trim it down. As I said on the stream, Chad and I are probably the longest talkers in all of the tavern, so it was hard for us to trim it down, but we're going to be more cognizant of keeping it to an hour because we want you guys to know the news and keep it to whatever is the most important. There's so many news stories to break down, and last week we had a lot to go on, and this week's going to be even more. I'm sure we're going to leave it something with Wrestle Kingdoms, Mercedes Moné, all that stuff that went down last night at Wrestle Kingdom. I don't know, dude. There's a lot to break down, but I love the concept of Wrestling Tonight. It was such a blast to get through it. And Chad and I, we don't do any shows together consistently, and I love working with the dude.
No, absolutely. It is always a pleasure to be on screen with one of the bad Chads, if not both bad Chads. But yeah, no, you guys did an absolute killer job, and like I said, I'm looking forward to the future of Monday nights, man.
All right, so let's get into the happy hour and talk about what's going on in 1995, July 1995. It's hot. We got some old school rap. We got Gangsta's Paradise is the #1 song in all of America. Coolio is very, very popular on the airwaves, but let's get into the happy hour and see what Dave Meltzer has to say.
Never gets old. Never gets old.
All right, let's go and start with the July 10th, 1995 newsletter. And we're going to be starting with something outside of the ring. It's the UFC emerging as this conglomerate that's one of those things that people are starting to catch fire. And the UFC, in quotes, super fight with Ken Wayne Shamrock and also Dan Severn, who's the current NWA heavyweight champion from Casper, Wyoming, looked to be the first battle of pro wrestling world claimants that was a true athletic contest, perhaps dating as far back as the Louis Stetcher era. Of course, with Shamrock, this is a wrestling match by any means. The parallels certainly end, and this match won't last 5 hours. So, dude, UFC is still in its infancy, and I think if we watch the growth of UFC and ECW together, you see a lot of parallels, and they go in different directions, but they're both in the birth period here. Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn were so essential to getting them off the ground. Ken Shamrock, his input in UFC, I don't think people remember how influential he really was in Ultimate Fighting.
No, absolutely, man. Dude was a pistol of a person and a personality. I thought for UFC, he did wonders. Way before you get into the pro wrestling, side of things. I think he was just a really, really good person to kind of put in the forefront of the UFC project. I thought it was awesome at the time. I remember losing my shit as a kid trying to order these events. My parents were like, "Fuck no, you're not allowed to. There's too much violence." We're like, "Well, do you see what I'm watching?" Like, but yeah, it's insane, man, to see that Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn. I mean, two guys we would see eventually come through the WWF doors. Both, it's insane that that this was the backbone of the startup for UFC.
Yeah, and we're certainly going to be talking about them in 1998. Probably not. We'll probably talk about Shamrock more than Severn, because Severn had a cup of coffee there in 1998. One of the more boring wrestlers, but true badass. One of the more badass guys. And you look at the transition for guys coming from wrestling going into UFC. It's funny here now we have wrestlers going into UFC, or vice versa, to do this interchange. It seems very common now today. You got guys like you name it, Brock Lesnar. This talks about Conor McGregor coming over. I know Tyson Fury is not a UFC fighter. He's a boxer, but it seems like this sort of paved the way. Maybe not as much charisma on Shamrock and Severn, but still, I guess the same notion's there.
Yeah, hell of a mustache though that Dan Severn had.
And also, you guys have remember in 1996 WCW, we talked about in the newsletter Pancrase, where people thought that was a shoot. They thought it was actually similar to UFC, but it was a work, and he was the world champion at the time. So to have two guys in the business fighting each other for real, I don't know. I'm sure people had their feelings about it, because obviously two guys are two top guys. If Severn was to go in there and get his ass beat, he's the current NWA heavyweight champion. I'm sure the National Wrestling Alliance wouldn't be too kind with that.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, listen, man, it's the legitness of it all is what makes it important, right? So I'd be here for it no matter what, especially back in '95. I think the mindset wasn't so transitionary for any companies. I don't think wrestling wanted to do anything with UFC. I don't think UFC wanted to do anything with wrestling yet. And I mean, we don't see it for a few more years later down the line, but like you said, it's insane.
Yeah, it took a bit for people to really get the faith and take the dive, and advertisers I'm speaking about and people that are fans. You talked about your mom didn't want you watching it. To get rid of the stigma, it took a while for UFC to become similar to what the NFL is, where it's just entertainment. People are gathering, having parties for fights, but that wasn't the case here. So let's continue with this story. Two wrestlers unknown to the majority of pro wrestling fans may draw a huge buy rate approaching that of WrestleMania. The UFC's pattern of growth on recent shows is any indication. It is not inconceivable this show could draw more viewers than any pay-per-view show involving pro wrestlers this year. It will definitely outdraw Hogan and Vader in a cage, almost certainly outdraw Diesel Sid, and could outdraw Lawrence Taylor at WrestleMania. Not bad for a group with no television. So Meltzer's been in on UFC from the beginning. He recognizes that this is where the trend is going. You could see sort of the passion of these UFC fans. It's similar to the ECW fans, because these guys have a bloodthirst and they like to see competition that's hard hitting, that's different. It's not watered down. It's not kid friendly. It's not Duke the Jumpster Drozy. It's not Doink the Clown. It's hard hitting action. And that's what UFC and ECW have so much in common with.
Yeah, no, and listen, I mean, you got UFC covers so many different angles. I mean, you get boxing fans, you get fighting fans in general, kung fu, you name it, jiu-jitsu, all that shit. So you put that all under with wrestling fans under one umbrella. Of course, it's going to become a huge thing. I mean, you got not only the bloodthirsty guys, but the knockout hungry boxing fans, hockey fans. I mean, their fighting was a huge deal for hockey in the 90s, as it still, I mean, kind of is to today, right? So yeah, I think UFC really captures that whole little bubble really well. And I think that's the difference between UFC's growth and ECW's not growth,
Yeah. Yeah, and keep in mind, UFC is doing this without TV, as Meltzer mentioned. He goes on continuing breaking down the fight and everything that has to happen for these guys to win the fight, which we're not going to sit here and break down. But he does mention what I mentioned before. He said the loser will still be recognized as a tough guy, will have a degree of luster taking from the reputation, have little chance at any of that of having another fight in UFC. There's a lot more than $20,000 at stake. in this match when it comes to both men's careers. So they're both taking a risk. We also can go back to CM Punk losing that UFC fight, and I'll never disparage him for what he did there because it took a lot of guts to get into the octagon and do what he did. And people were so quick to meme and make jokes about CM Punk when he lost. But I think, it's one of those things where you get caught in a hold. It's different than sports entertainment. A match that's been building or a fight that's been building for the course of a year and a half, 2 years can end in a second.
Yeah.
And you could order a pay-per-view and the match that you've been waiting for. I keep saying match, but the fight you've been waiting for winds up lasting, you go and get a drink from the fridge and it's over. So I don't know. I think that's why pro wrestling will forever have my heart, because you can guarantee you're going to get 3 hours of action. You can't say the same at UFC.
No, absolutely. And like that's the thing. The unpredictability is kind of also a draw too. Everybody could say, oh, wrestling scripted, blah, blah. And like you go in knowing that Undertaker and Triple H are going to have a 30-minute match, not get, Undertaker get knocked out in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Lesnar did for UFC and for WWE together legitimize wrestlers in that world where people are not looked at as these, the Hogans and the Flairs that could never last a fight with the toughest guys. I mean, you would have put Flair in the ring with Ken Shamrock in 1995. Things would be really ugly. And that's, Flair is one of the best of what he's ever done. But I think he would admit he'd never be able to last 2 seconds. And that's what the wrestling world was perceived as. And guys like Lesnar, guys like Shamrock, guys that were legit tough guys, changed that perception. Whether it be right or wrong from the beginning, it was altered because these guys got in the octagon and proved themselves.
Yeah, no, 100%. I remember when Lesnar came back to WWE after doing the UFC stint. I thought it was such a bold move, and I was like, man, this is crazy. But look at the growth of the company from just then. I mean, it was huge, and pairing him with Cena right away, it was just a really awesome piece. Like you got the biggest guy in WWE, and then you got one of the biggest guys from WWE that turned into this giant UFC star. The magnitude of it all was a blockbuster pay-per-view moment, which is a hard thing to accomplish anytime this day and age. It's insane.
Yeah, and we're removed from the 80s where wrestling, the Rock and Wrestling Connection, where things were at an all-time high. We're 3 years before 1998 with the Attitude Era, where wrestling will reach a peak that it will probably never reach again. But they're talking about, or Meltzer is, I should say, the winner potentially could be in line for commercial endorsements and become a breakthrough character in all of the sports world and help their wrestling career. So let's not dismiss that both these guys took a huge risk by getting in there. And Dan Severn, he's a wrestler. He could have made his career and just been a tough guy and put it on arm bars and working matches. He proved himself out there. And Ken Shamrock, same thing. For me, I think missed opportunity in the late 90s is Ken Shamrock as world champion. You could have made a case for that in 1999, 1998.
100%. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to the ECW world. I thought with UFC, I wanted to set the landscape because that's what was going on in the sports world. And, it was the first time we're seeing it. But let's go to ECW for a second. With Cactus Jack in Japan, the July 15th ECW Arena show off SANDMAN versus AXL ROTTEN for the ECW title, Stevie Richards versus Luna in a cage, and Public Enemy versus the GANGSTAS in a spray paint match. So I usually would skip over this when they're previewing these matches. We do know all but one came true. Public Enemy and the GANGSTAS don't wrestle in a spray paint match. Had me thinking to myself, what exactly is a spray paint match? And if you were booking it, Mike Belcaster, what would it look like?
Oh man, if it would have to be a few years later, because it would have to be the NWO versus somebody in a spray paint match, right? But yeah, I don't know how you would book that. Spray paint on a pole match.
First person is that where we're going? Spray paint their opponent, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird gimmick, right? Kind of like the Green Mist, but not necessarily as sneaky. But yeah, I don't know. I think in this instance, I would assume you'd have to spray paint both opponents to get the victory, right? Like there's the only way it would work.
Well, let's just say I'm glad they changed it to a cage match, because it is Rage in the Cage after all. The cage was already there, and they figured what better way to continue this feud with Public Enemy and the GANGSTAS but put them in a cage match. I don't think spray paint match carried that baton a little bit further to keep it going. So I'm happy they changed their mind. All right. So Paul Heyman mentioned bringing in both Johnny Smith, who cares, but also mentioned Chris Jericho over the weekend. So Chris Jericho doing some dates in Japan, Mexico. We do know eventually he has a great run in ECW. Paul Heyman's just handpicking these guys that are destined for success. And I don't think that's a coincidence. We mentioned Psychosis and Rey Mysterio will be on the card next week. Obviously, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, a who's who of great wrestlers, Chris Jericho being next in line. It just seems like Paul Heyman continues to this day, has a really good eye for talent.
Yeah, no, and that, like, not just talent, but he knows how to make them stars. He really does. I mean, well, I'm going to bat up for Sandman a little bit. He was a little bit more in his element during this Heatwave match. It brought out the better of him compared to fighting a Shane Douglas or even a Cactus Jack. I mean, it was more in his element, and I think Paul really knows how to captivate that energy and make it fan friendly, make people understand and really want to see it.
Yeah, and as much a bad rap as Paul Heyman got at the end, where he abandoned the ship, he went over to WWF, showed up on TV on Raw, and also when ECW roster knew it was over, and he gets a bad rap for like bouncing checks and all that. Think about guys that he got paid life-changing money because he took a risk on them and made them attractive to other promotions. We mentioned last week Public Enemy. You can also talk about Sandman. Those guys probably would have no business or no draw anywhere else if they didn't have this environment to thrive. And I'm not taking anything away from what they did. They're both sort of what makes each other stronger. And removing Sandman from ECW, it's not the same. And removing Public Enemy from ECW, it's not the same. But that's not to say even Joey Styles, he got life-changing money from WWE, a much bigger check than he would have if ECW didn't give him a chance to be this unorthodox voice in wrestling, because he's not Gordon Sully. He's not Jim Ross. He's not Tony Schiavone. So ECW changed up what was the expectation of what would be the voice behind the booth, and that got him paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it worked out for the better.
So those guys owed a little a debt of gratitude to Paul Heyman a little bit. And I'm sure they're very grateful to him, but those guys, they got paid big bucks because of the fact that Paul Heyman put them in a spot to highlight their strengths and really mask their weaknesses.
100%.
All right, so if Chris Benoit returns, expect them to immediately to program him with Eddie Guerrero, which they seem to go hand in hand, and I can't wait to see those matches. They've got a show on 7/28 in Middletown, New York at a fair. So Carnival, we got funnel cake, we got some popcorn, and you got some goddamn Extreme Championship Wrestling happening right in a mud field. Reminds me of Outlaw Wrestling that's been happening. It's in the Northeast, run by Bull James. They run outside breweries. It's like the most awesome outside experience you could have. You're just having 12% beers watching wrestling. That's what I would imagine this would be like.
Yeah, well, maybe the beer is a little less strong, but the cotton candy hits a little bit harder too.
So Vampire Warrior will work ECW dates in Florida, and he has to transition himself into work the Northeast shows. Meltzer conjectures, I guess he and Luna are married, but split up at the present time. So the aspect of the angle has some legitimacy that they're doing with him. We've seen Gangrel be a little bit more of a focal point on the television show. He doesn't become a main eventer or a mainstay that we're going to be seeing for a long time, but he definitely has more of an appearance than I thought we would see of him. I thought he'd be a one-off as a enhancement talent, but we're seeing a little bit of storyline going here.
Yeah, fanging and banging, starting off strong.
All right, so going to the July 17th, 1995 newsletter, Kevin Sullivan officially replaces Ric Flair as the head booker of WCW after a meeting on July 5th. So Meltzer talks about the news was hardly a surprise, as for weeks, Flair and Eric Bischoff had been at odds over numerous things, many stemming from disagreements on booking philosophy between Flair and Hogan. And obviously Hogan and Savage and Jimmy Hart were involved in this as well. The reason I bring this up is since Sullivan's wife is Woman, being a fixture at the ECW storyline, and Sullivan used to work there, he's familiar with the talent in Extreme Championship Wrestling. There's a lot of talk. He'll try to shore up the undercard with some ECW wrestlers. So I'll continue that for a second. We popped into 1996 with Kevin Sullivan. He has the book. He's the guy in charge. For better or for worse, he did some good stuff. He did some bad stuff. But it's interesting because Woman is such a focal point in both the seasons that we've done here. And now it's making sense why he's going over there. And obviously, we know the history of Kevin Sullivan. Woman doesn't last. She eventually marries Chris Benoit. But it just shows you how even that small decision has a ripple effect. From in Atlanta, it affected Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, and it's crazy, which makes me more appreciative of Sullivan because we get to see all these wonderful stars from ECW get that television time in WCW '96. I don't think it would have happened without Sullivan, the Booker man, being at the head of the pen.
So, I mean, I would imagine this would have happened anyway because ECW was getting eyes on the product and people were very in love with the talent they were putting out there. So, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but like you said, I think it would have been probably less significant because Paul Heyman poo-pooed the idea of it being a raid. At the moment, we do know it becomes a full-blown raid where Paul Heyman has to shore up his talent roster over and over again. WCW
Yeah.
continues, and it's almost like laughable at this point. They're throwing a lot of money at these guys, and ECW can't keep up. And Paul Heyman talks about this. He discounted the idea of a large-scale raid on the belief that Sullivan himself knows the position is tenuous and that WCW Booker has proven to be a scapegoat position ever since the formation of the company, and that eventually Sullivan, who doesn't have a long-term WCW contract, is 46 years old. He may need to return to ECW and thus won't want to burn that bridge. I found that fascinating because that's not what happens. They do raid, and I'm sure he's just like, whatever. It's for the betterment of the WCW promotion.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So here are some of the names that they're bandying about trying to get them over from ECW to WCW. Among them are Public Enemy, Eddie Guerrero, Al Snow, Chris Benoit, Shane Douglas, Woman, and Disco Inferno. All of those guys do eventually wind up in WCW, right? Al Snow is the only guy I'm unsure of. Al Snow does have some time in WCW. Am I wrong?
Yeah,
on that?
I'm not 100% sure about Al Snow, but 99% confident that he might have had a little small stint there.
It seems like everybody did, but it's funny. He continues talking about Eddie Guerrero, and this is Dave Meltzer here. I want to talk about being finger on the pulse, and it didn't take, a guy who could predict the future and read fortunes to understand the talent of Eddie Guerrero. But this is really interesting to read in 1995, where Eddie is still not quite well known to casual wrestling fans. And he's gushing over Eddie Guerrero here. And how could you not? He says, Eddie Guerrero is one of the top 6 or 7 pure workers in the world today. However, neither WWF nor WCW have to this point even tried, let alone had a success in pushing someone of his size as anything past the mid-card. You could look at WCW's track record with having Brian Pillman, who is a bigger man than Guerrero for more than 5 years, tells a story in itself. Guerrero right now is only 27. He's been waiting for the chance in the U.S., and with his spot in AAA drying up due to economic collapse in Mexico, he only has a part-time job in Japan and some ECW dates on his calendar. He continues talking about the situation with Eddie where he's having, and I wouldn't say difficulty. I think he has his ideas about where he wants to be booked, but it's going to take a little bit for people to recognize, the legendary status that is Eddie Guerrero. Imagine having him and not wanting him. What was the deal with WCW and WWF at the time?
No, it's weird, weird booking all the way around, and it really didn't get there until Eddie got into WWF. I mean, a couple years removed, right? I mean, it wasn't a fast track rise to the main event. He had to go through lowriders in China and God knows what else on the way up there. But yeah, it's insane. I mean, even today you could see mishaps on bookings of talent there. You're like, why aren't these guys doing more? House of Black, we can go through the list all day long, but he's one of those guys that's pigeonholed. Of course, it was different back in the '90s because your card separations were much different. You had mid card and then you had main event. The low card was barely existent. Those were like dark matches and shit. But having Eddie Guerrero, as talented as he is here in 1995, and not trying to book him into a bigger picture is just it's mind-boggling, man.
And some of the kindest things that he said here, he didn't go as far as saying he'd be a future world champion, but he does say he potentially could save some bad WCW pay-per-views, which they're putting on a few in 1995. He talks about if you put him in a program with a guy like Brian Pillman over the light heavyweight championship, which was the light heavyweight championship at the time, it becomes the cruiserweight championship. He says putting that on the card could almost single-handedly save some of the worst shows. So he recognizes the talent that's there. He also pokes a hole right there with, we know smaller guys are not going to be booked in the main event. The smallest guy would be, Shawn Michaels. He's still over 6 foot. It's very, very hard to build any traction in the main event. And just shows you everything that guy like Eddie Guerrero overcame to eventually have that spot where he is the world champion, WrestleMania 20, standing in the ring with Chris Benoit.
Yeah, no, it's insane.
So going through the other guys, Chris Benoit's name is always naturally mentioned since he could be the best non-Japanese performer in the world today. This according to Meltzer. Since WCW has a relationship with New Japan, it's an easy mix than WWF. Still, Benoit was there before and given no push, and neither he nor WCW has really changed to a great degree since that time. Same critique that a lot of the old school mentality guys have on a guy like Benoit. He's smaller. He overcame the same amount of stigma of being in the ring, being a smaller talent. But yeah, this is a guy who's recognized by Meltzer as being a main event star, really beneficial to have on your roster.
Yeah, no, and even when watching as a young kid, I always thought Eddie and Benoit were super, super over, like talented wise, and you could watch them wrestle all day long. It's a shocker that they didn't like get to this point earlier. It's just it's mind blowing.
He talks about Shane Douglas, but we know the story there. But he talks another thing about Woman, and he said if they've got a spot for her, she's there. And Meltzer says, I guess she would feud with Diamond Doll or have an announcing spot, and she would be most likely involved in the Monday night show, which is tentatively named Power Hour. They didn't have the name Nitro yet. They had Power Hour there for WCW. So to have WCW Power Hour doesn't quite have the same lore as Nitro. And it's funny because, like, you know, I love NWA Power, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if the Monday Night Wars with Raw versus Power Hour would have the same appeal.
No, not at all. But interesting because you see the origins of the power plant and all the other crazy shit that they were working with back then. So
they were going to get power in no matter what.
Yeah.
So he talks about the Steiners as well because they have no New Japan bookings from this point through mid-October, which in and itself is surprising since New Japan's August and September tours are two of the biggest of the year. Steiners are going to be starting with ECW on the 728 show in Middletown, New York at that fair for about a 2-month program. So we're going to see the Steiners. I think we saw in the newsletter the week before that they are not going to be teaming together. Maybe they will. I think the Steiners fit perfectly. I can't wait to see what Scott Steiner does with this ECW roster. It should be interesting.
Oh, it's going to be a blast.
So they're going to be trying to keep them away from each other. I think the other thing we talked about last week was they want to highlight the teams that are there and they don't want the Steiners to make them look bad. The direction at this point, according to Meltzer, was 6-man, no titles involved, Steiners teaming with Taz as a regular trio, feuding with the likes of Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko and Too Cold Scorpio with their first feud. I mean, I
love it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, what could you not like about any of that?
So we have a booker from EMLL, and he talks about Eddie Guerrero as well, and I just can't resist talking about Eddie Guerrero being wax poetic about throwing superlatives his way because he deserves it. Scholar wants to use Guerrero as one of his major stars' own EMLL cards, which should start in the fall. Scholar had apparently spoken with Paul Heyman about getting Guerrero out of his previously booked ECW arena date that night. Paul Heyman agreed and wanted to film what would presumably have been a Guerrero versus Furza Guerrero match for ECW television, where Guerrero wearing his ECW TV title belt into the ring in Los Angeles and would be announced on ECW television as the match being ECW TV title versus the IWC middleweight title match with Guerrero winning, thereby giving Scholar's belt exposure with ECW audience. In addition, Heyman had wanted to use the LA match to set up a rematch between the two in Philly. All right, a lot of words there, but this is just, I mean, Guerrero's calendar is filling up. But it also is interesting to me because Sabu got a lot of heat for doing the same thing. Sabu wanted to work Japan, and he backed out of a date. Guerrero is linked onto the show. He's already wrestling. They have plans for him. And Heyman's like, you know what? Yeah, you can go and do your thing. It's just interesting.
Yeah. No, maybe he asked a little nicer. Who knows? He didn't threaten him with a railroad spike. He was just very, very polite.
All right. So when we talked about bounce checks and money issues, some of that stuff starts to crop up here. We talked about management changes and leadership changes. And Meltzer talks about some of these bounce checks. He says, when it comes to the question of bounce checks that was brought up at the ECW Internet Convention, Jim Cornette said that as a company that operates week to week, they have bounce checks, but in every case have made them good on the next show. He said New Jack had made checks bounce, but they were always made good at the next show. And the only person in pro wrestling that Smoky Mountain Wrestling owes even one dime to right now is Cactus Jack. We're going to talk a little bit more about Smoky Mountain Wrestling in a sec. Woo. But it's funny. Jim Cornette, Paul Heyman, interconnected. They probably have some agreements, some disagreements. Jim Cornette likes to disagree with everybody. But yeah, similar critique on Jim Cornette as the people are having about ECW with checks that are not clearing. Fascinating.
Very fascinating. The rubber ball checkbook is always going to be popping up when we're talking about ECW.
So some more details about Smoky Mountain Wrestling and their books about who they owe money to. Smoky Mountain Wrestling owes Mustafa $100 when he started no showing. He actually quit showing up a week before New Jack. And he said when Cactus Jack worked for Smoky Mountain several months ago, he waited 3 weeks to cash his check. And that was the time when the company was short on money and it bounced. He told Jack to put the check back in. But when Cactus waited a few more weeks before doing so, it happened again. Jim Cornette then sent him part of the money to Atlanta, not knowing Jack had moved to New York. And said Cactus called him mad from New York, calling him dirty names like Herb Adams, not realizing some money had been sent to Atlanta. Cactus later apologized, explaining the problem, and said he'd leave the new address in New York for Cornette to send the rest of the money, but Cornette said Jack hasn't called him since. Cornette was mad about how he was being portrayed in Philadelphia since ECW had thousands of dollars in outstanding debts and just went through a financial reorganization while they were making him out to be a welshing lowlife. Cornette also was mad at how the Gangstas switched from SMW to ECW was being portrayed. This could just be fixed with technology today, like just Venmo me, Zell me. But yeah, you see Cactus Jack moving all over the place. It's hard to get money from point A to point B. And that's got to be super challenging. It's challenging enough, like being in the small part I play in the indies and seeing like getting shows together, getting people that are available for the same night is hard enough. Imagine trying to track them down to pay them after the fact where you don't even know where they live, because a guy like Cactus Jack could be in Mexico, he could be in Japan, he could be in New York, he could be in Atlanta. Like it's got to be impossible. Got to be such a headache. I give them credit.
Yeah, Western Union was making bank off of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling fees that went into the payments.
So more stuff on the Gangstas here with Cornette. Meltzer says that he decided, he being Cornette, to finish the Gangstas up on 7-1 and called up promotions trying to get them to work. Naturally, WWF ran from that idea like a vampire from a cross, and USWA told Cornette they weren't interested. Cornette called Paul Heyman to get them into ECW after 7-1. Now, at the same time, New Jack, who was already knew he was finishing up, he started negotiating with Todd Gordon and agreed to start on 6/17. And the Gangstas, as we know, started to miss the shows. Cornette was hot. Even though he's trying to help these guys get paid, he still got screwed and he was upset. But that's wrestling, pal.
Goddamn, pal.
All right, Sabu is back in the newsletter here. Him and Judge Dredd flew all the way to London, England for a show on 7/7. Sabu wrestled Dirt Bike Kid in a match which drew a consensus of 4.25 stars. Mike Belcaster, anyone out there, find me this match between Sabu and the Dirt Bike Kid that almost got 5 stars from Meltzer.
I will be on the hunt.
In this match, reportedly, Sabu broke 3 ribs when he did a moonsault out of the ring and landed on a bottle. Oof. And although the crowd was only 225 people, they kept chanting ECW, we want blood, and fans were handing out frying pans to the wrestlers to use as objects. The chants were amazing because ECW has no television whatsoever in England. Man, just shows the reach, man. That's in 1995 too. This is still at the infancy. We obviously the spring they're starting to really get hot in the summer. They'll really get hot at the end of the year. It just shows you, man. Sabu's not even with ECW. ECW has no television over in England, and goddamn, they're still very, very popular there.
Yeah, I mean, look, come on, they're trying to hand frying pans over to the talent. You know, you got a good company when your fan base is in a different country handing frying pans over.
So going back to Chance of ECW, the one that happened at King of the Ring 1995 in Philadelphia, we got some news on that front. After the chance at the WWF last pay-per-view and comments in so many places, all the key players in Titan are fully aware of ECW as more than an insignificant factor in the overall wrestling world. At the same time, pro wrestling is violence. Non-violent pro wrestling is equivalent to water without any liquid. Just because you don't see men pile driving women or using frying pans, a kick to the ribs, punch to the face, or clothesline from behind is still violence. So I'll get into more of that for a second. But your thoughts on this? Do you think this was the main thing that started that ECW small run where they were coming on Raw? Do you think this is where it started or something different?
Oh, I'm sure this is the little seed droppings of the fruition of that. It has to be, right? I don't think Vince would be putting ECW talent. Oh, he never did that for any other company, by the way he did ECW. I don't like, not to this day. We haven't seen, TNA come out there, nothing ever. he gave them a hell of a nice little break there, especially
Right.
by having them wrestle on Raw and shit like that. So this definitely has got to be the beginning of him noticing, oh shit, these guys mean business because we're hearing, the chants and everything.
It's also it feels like a fever dream when you watch those clips on Raw. Like when you watch it from the Manhattan Center and you see Sabu jump off the R and it almost falls over, and Sandman and Dreamer sitting ringside. It's like it really is trippy to see because they don't fit in that new gen 1995 Raw ring, and there they
Not at
are
all.
in living color. It's bizarre to watch. So if you guys haven't seen that, make sure you go and check that out because it's crazy to me.
Yeah, no, it's still mind blowing to this day. Like I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think we ever will.
And I went back, and this is obviously well later, but I watched the 2007 Royal Rumble and the ECW influence it has on that Rumble. Obviously, ECW has its own television show on Sci-Fi at that point, but you got guys like Tommy Dreamer, Sabu in that Rumble. Sandman makes an entrance. I was watching and I was like, wow, like ECW's legacy is so much further than what people even imagine. It stretched lengths of time that most companies don't. I mean, you talked about them getting the platform that Vince gave them, but I mean, they maximized every bit of exposure they had and they ran with it. It's crazy.
It's super crazy. I mean, they even got onto the video games. Like there was
Yeah.
SmackDown versus Raw, I think like 2008, but it was in bold letters featuring ECW. You had Sabu, you had Sandman, Tommy Dreamer. Like it was insane how far these guys came. I mean, including going down. I mean, somebody like Balls Mahoney, after the ECW thing folded up, they were
Yeah.
still trying to work him in on Raw. I mean, he had that little stint with Kelly for a while. It was great, and I was so happy to see these guys finally get their moment. Be it years a little too late for most of them, but it was still cool, man.
So going back to what Meltzer was saying about violence and defending ECW in regard to WWF, he talks about McMahon greatly changing his organization because he's trying to live down his past. And make no mistake about it, 90% of his current problems Titan Sports is facing stem indirectly or directly from not nipping its major problems in the bud. Before they bit back, and many of the problems are no longer there. Nearly everything McMahon is looking down his nose at are things he used to build his company. He mentions, this is Meltzer, Hogan got juice, as in blood, not roids, is what he writes. On many pay-per-view shows, Lord knows the company isn't now, but was built on steroids. Sherry Martel, when she worked for Titan, regularly took a pounding, and remember those Sherry Luna clothes ripping angles? And this isn't knocking any of this. This is Meltzer again still. Just let's not lose sight of its own history. This reminds me of a loose, moral person that continues to break the rules and then gets mad at other people who are doing the same. Vince
Yeah.
did this. He built a platform, built his legacy on very similar shock and drop things in front of you that WWF used to do. And he's like, no, he's turning his nose up at it. And they'll eventually go back to it to an nth degree. They go full blown. I remember I guess what started it was that Super Bowl ad where they went full like tops off, violence, blood. I don't give a shit. We're the Attitude Era. And he realizes that's what sells. Like we talk about this all UFC, ECW, and eventually WWF took it. They put their money behind it and they blew ECW out of the water, obviously.
Yeah, and very good bring up of the Super Bowl commercial because it really showed the chaos, the chaotic nature of what success for WWF was at the time. I mean, you got explosions, people fighting in the office, Stone Cold hitting chair shots on businessmen. It was the best shit ever. But yeah, it's so crazy to think about how that like was the showcase of it. It was Vince going all the way back to those very, very disgusting forms of nature, and it was really cool. ECW had a huge part of that, and we know that for a fact.
So, I forget which Monday Night War documentary this was, whether it be the show on Peacock or just the DVD in general, the documentary. Anytime it's mentioned and you mention Raw versus Nitro, WCW versus WWF, you can't tell the full story without taking consideration ECW and the influence it had on both sides, the talent influx, the storyline, the reality-based programming, all of that was right from ECW. And if it wasn't for ECW bringing that out there and Paul Heyman's thoughts, who knows if WWF would have won the Attitude Era, or I should say the Monday Night War with the Attitude Era. It's impossible to say, but I would say with the money that Turner had, I don't think WCW was going away the way that it did.
Yeah.
I think WCW had a really good chance of winning the Monday Night War if ECW didn't exist. And I know that's like butterfly effect conversation, but ECW can be thanked to have WWE around today.
Yeah, 100%. But also, I mean, same, fold. If ECW wasn't around, we wouldn't have like the cruiserweight division for WCW, and it would be hard for. I mean, we watched some of those shows in '96. There was a lot of shit in the shit sandwich.
Yes.
But those were the saving graces. Those matches, that whole division was what kept us captivated when you had to watch Colonel Parker fucking every week. So it was. Yeah, I think it would have been detrimental to both sides of the company. Wrestling would be in a very, very worse place than it is now without ECW.
And this is very similar to, it could be written today. And Meltzer writes, Titan, no choice but to have its product the way it is, as far as standards of not using chairs, not as far as weak work rate at house shows, because it would lose TV stations and advertisers, which are the lifeblood of the company. There it is right there in plain black and white. That's the same thing as 2022. They have to abide by a certain standard because it's bigger than them now. They could do the things they want to do, but they can't please that hardcore fan because they have sponsors. They got bigger things to worry about. And when you really think about it, it makes me sad because they're alienating the wrestling fan. And I'm not saying everything has to be blood and guts, but WWE is not worried about pleasing wrestling fans. They're worried about pleasing advertisers and sponsors.
Yeah. I mean, to an extent, I think there's pulls here and there to try to get those people to tune in, be it Cody Rhodes, coming out there, saying the word wrestling, taking the gimmick from AEW that was a wrestling company. You see it in WWE. You're like, oh, the casual fan would see that and be like, oh, this guy's the wrestling guy, but it is a hard thing for them to work with. It's a hard thing for them to sell, especially when they're doing crazy shit with Bray Wyatt and all this stuff. And if you're a wrestling fan, you just know the ring and you know the performers. So that, I mean, it's a hard thing to gamble.
Well, they became, when you ask a casual person what wrestling is, they think WWE. I would say, 9.5 people out of 10. That's what they say. And you can't blame them. They own the monopoly. They're Pepsi, they're Coke, while other sodas are great. You can go to your, talk about a state fair. You got a local mom and pop table making homemade soda. That could be the most delicious soda on the planet, the best soda you ever had. But the fact that Pepsi and Coke are accessible, they're in grocery stores, able to get your hands on it and drink them, you're going to be bringing that to your table because maybe you're never going to see that other person again. How do I even find that person to buy their soda, even though it's better? So I can't blame people that are, casual fans that don't have the insight. And we even talk about Wrestle Kingdom. Like, some people didn't know how to find it last night. They probably wanted to watch it. They just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And they figure out how to watch WWE because it's right in your face all the time.
100%.
All right, that's it for the newsletter. I think it's time to get our fix. We're going to be talking about hardcore TV, which is going to go quick because there's no matches on these hardcore TVs. And then we're going to get into, while we're here, HEATWAVE 1995.
I see Hogan and Marty Jannetty just partying every time I see that.
So you notice I don't have any banner going across the bottom, and that's because there are no matches to break down for hardcore TV for the last 3 weeks.
Crazy.
But hardcore TV from 7/4/1995 was a compilation package, and the majority of this show from 7/4, 4th of July, revolved around highlights from Hardcore Heaven. Raven and Stevie Richards recently won the ECW tag titles we talked about last week. So the show highlights of that, not the full match. So we're still waiting for that full match to be shown. I'm sure eventually we'll get to where that is. We have a segment, which is pretty cool. Raven and Stevie are celebrating their championship win with Richards jumping around singing "We Are the Champions." Raven turns around and Richards says the Public Enemy are pansies and they are not, and they are the real role models. So a nice little introduction to Raven and Stevie Richards and showing some insight. outside of the ring and to build some character.
Yeah, and Raven's full of character, as we will see later as it keeps going and going and going. It's awesome. And same thing with Richards too. Richards really stealing the show here. He's very energetic, very goofy, just a fun little ball of energy to be watching. Love it.
And I'd be amiss if I didn't mention this because I've been watching. I watched this old documentary on World Class Championship Wrestling from Texas with the Von Erichs and all the stuff that went on with them. And this segment reminded me of something like that they started. They were the first person to do character profiles outside of the ring. And obviously people just think it's natural in wrestling. It just seems obvious that you're going to do character things outside of the ring and to build awareness of who these guys are supposed to be. But it started in World Class. ECW was the perfect example of utilizing every one of these to build passion with people to care about these characters, and pointing case Raven and Stevie here.
100%.
So the final segment was the Sandman and woman cutting a promo regarding his upcoming title defense against AXL Rotten. Sandman goes in on Axel. He says he's fat, smelly, and you're a bastard. Ugh. Sandman tells us that he will take a baseball bat and barbed wire to show how extreme he can get. Honestly, the highlight of this, if you're going to watch any of it, just watch the Raven and Stevie Richards segment. I thought it was good. It's super quick. They have a lot of momentum coming as a duo. But yeah, this is, I guess, the reason that Axel's challenging and makes we talked about it after the culmination with his brother Ian. Yeah. Where are they going with him? They're going to put him in the main event and obviously not winning, but what else do you do with him?
Yeah, I mean, and even after that, like the guy comes out like a fart in church. Like there's no way to put him somewhere that's awesome. Eventually he does the tag thing with Balls Mahoney, but just a waste of fucking space.
So the go home show in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on July 11th, 1995. No original content on the show either. The matches that they showed were previously taped for Hardcore Heaven. The other things they have here, ECW World Champion Sandman and Woman talk about AXL Rotten challenging for the title. Woman goes in on him saying he's not hardcore enough to handle a woman like her. Sandman says, I enjoyed seeing you and your brother beat each other up like idiots. And then we have an interview with Joey Styles and Paul Heyman, which was a really good interview. Heyman put over Too Cold Scorpio as a great wrestler, but he stepped into the path of rage, and thus Eddie Guerrero has been chosen to be the partner for Taz for Heatwave. And then Heyman suggests that Bill Alfonso write a will before he comes back to the ECW arena. So Paul Heyman, obviously, we know how legendary on the stick he is. He's such a good talker, but we're starting to see him really blossom into the Paul E character that just becomes Paul E.
Yeah.
He was a little bit always Paul E, but this feels like more of what we see all the time with him now.
Yeah, no, all of promos, especially in the ECW realm, were something like it was a spectacle to watch, man. Especially 1995, this guy could walk you around in circles just by looking at you in the eyes and giving you that. Too Cold Scorpio is one of the best talents right here in Extreme Championship Wrestling. It's just the way his cadence is the motherfucker strutted when he talked. Like you loved every bit of it, man.
And let's give some love for Too Cold Scorpio. He was on the GCW shows this past weekend till infinity. He wrestled Speedball Mike Bailey and
banger.
Dude, he did the same finish. He did everything. He didn't go over in the match, but it still was epic to see him in the ring moving around. An older guy with a love for the business. And we talk about GCW and ECW. They're interchangeably connected because of the fact that GCW feels inspired by it. And of course it is. But Too Cold Scorpio helps bridge that gap. And it felt, I don't know, like poetic a little bit to see Too Cold in that ring in GCW in front of that Showboat audience, and probably thinking about the times in Philly and probably comparing. It'd be interesting to see what he thinks about comparing the two and environment wise, because the Showboat certainly has its own energy. Not the same as Philadelphia with ECW, but Atlantic City GCW certainly has energy to it for sure.
Oh, I could imagine. And who would have thought? I mean, we're 95 here, but you're thinking years down the line that Too Cold Scorpio, maybe Tommy Dreamer, Rhino. There's a very, very small handful of these guys that are still around and still able to work. It's insane.
Yeah, seeing him do that, the tumbleweed leg drop that he ended so many matches with, and also he's another guy. I'm not saying he didn't need Paul Heyman to highlight his strengths and hide his, because he didn't really have that many weaknesses in the ring. he goes and gets paid by WWF with being the Flash Funk gimmick. And he put on that hat, did that dance, didn't matter. He was like, whatever, comes back and does his own thing. He's remembered more fondly for the ECW stuff. But I'm sure when WWF signed him on, they're probably like expecting the Too Cold performance. And Flash Funk was entertaining, but you pigeonhole someone with that gimmick, and he just was a victim of being booked as a mid-carder. He was a mid-carder from the jump, and he never could have got a chance to be a main eventer, even though he had the skills to do it.
Yeah, very sad, but got one of the best bone crunching action figures out of the deal, so we all win. It was great.
Yes. I'm a big BCA guy. I love that Attitude Era. That is like my sweet spot. I can think of Christmas is when I open those figures, and that's one of the figures I got on Christmas in that giant monster ring, which to me is still tops of the ring. I know you guys are talking about that Attitude Era ring that came out. I think it dropped today.
Yes,
right? The order came with the Ultimate Kane. So to me, the old school monster ring was the be all end all with the ropes and all of that. You could put weapons under the ring.
The best.
It didn't have the scratch logo on it, but it was emerging to have it.
Yeah, you didn't even need the scratch logo because the imagination took over once you started throwing those damn things around, and they were fun to throw around because they were so rubbery and like they had bounce. They were cartoony. It was such a fun time, man. I could talk about Bone Crunchers all fucking day long.
I just absolutely love them, and I also love those ECW figures too. I don't have many of them, but I do have some. Just probably, and they were so easy to play with the other Jax figures, where you could put them together and they were like similar size. The RVD was so easy to do the frog splash with. So I do love when, not that they were doing this on purpose, where figures were almost working together, that they were like interchangeable, where you put them in the ring. Because when you eventually went from Hasbro to Jack Specific, it just like, dude, I can't play with this Hogan with this Stone Cold. It doesn't make any sense. It's a size difference. But when you have these toys, I mean, you can go back to the WCW figures, even like the San Francisco toy makers, those are a little bit bigger than, a little bit smaller than the LGM, but a little bit bigger than the Bone Cruncher. So they're not as conducive to play with each other. So
yeah, no, you really had to get it down, But ECW toys were amazing. I had the whole plethora. I actually gave it to a friend of mine, one of my best wrestling friends out there. I gave him the whole set and the ring and everything. And then I seen how much it was worth after I gave it to him, and I was like, "Oh fuck!" And everything, every character, the ring was full. It had all 3 pieces of the cage. It was amazing.
That was one of the better rings too. I had that as a kid. Didn't take care of it, so it's not worth it. Was awesome. But yeah, it's one of those things where you don't realize it. And those Bone Crunchers are not. I mean, maybe down the road it'll be worth more money, but those, for whatever reason, nostalgia. Like during 2020, those ECW figures bounced up, and some of them in package, like that new Jack with the noose, obviously the Brian Myers was chasing after, the variant. I mean, thousands of dollars we're talking about. That ring is enormously expensive. And that's, I guess it just speaks to our generation, how passionate we are about these nostalgic toys.
Damn right, man. Nothing beat walking in the Toys R Us and seeing an ECW section. And when you knew what it was all about, you're like, oh hell yeah, throw everything in the car. I mean, the ring came with like 20 weapons. It was a great deal. It was $20. You got Sabu and RVD with it. It was fucking. It doesn't get better than that, man. And
similar to the Bone Crunchers, the playability where the legs can be manipulated wherever you want.
Yeah.
And like a guy like Sabu, he can't be stiff. Like the dude has to be able to flip, and that's what made them so good. I could talk about those all day, but maybe we could do an ECW special episode, which you said you don't have any anymore, but maybe we could talk about them.
Oh, I could still, we could talk all day long. I mean, I just had them recently. Just did give them away last 2 summers ago.
And we said goodbye to them, but let's say hello to ECW Heatwave 1995 Rage in the Cage, July 15th from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the ECW Arena. Of course, our current champs, you know it. No title changes since we last left you, but I'll remind you, world champion still the Sandman. He won it back on April 15th, 1995. Our world tag team champions, Raven and Stevie Richard, they won it back 6/30/1995. Inexplicably not at the main event at Hardcore Heaven. They won it at Mountaintop Madness at a house show. And of course, TV champion is Eddie Guerrero. He's looking for greener pastures elsewhere. He won it back on 4/8/95. And those are our champions, a good crop of them.
Good crop. A league of extraordinary gentlemen.
We lead in, of course, with our host, Joey Styles. He kicks off the show, and Bill Alfonso comes out, gets a ton of heat, talking about something. The house mic is really shitty because it's the ECW Arena. And Todd Gordon immediately follows behind him and wants to fight Fonzie until a bunch of jobbers mid-carders, the whole locker room, aside from the main guys, came out. Fonzie gets in a good shot while Commissioner Gordon is held back. Awesome way to start the fucking night, man. These people were hot. They wanted this, and that's how you get people foaming up the mouth to get them ready to chant things, and they wanted Bill Alfonso to get his goddamn ass kicked.
Yeah, 100%. I never realized how amazing Todd Gordon was. Like, he really has the passion to beat the piss out of him, and you feel it. You know, like it just reminds me of like that kid at school or that one person at the job that you work. They're just on like consistently being a loudmouth, you know, ruining all the fun. Party pooper, and Todd Gordon is all of us, you know, we're going to strangle him and just shut the fuck up, Fonzie. They love it. Great, awesome chemistry.
so good. And I think you made a good point about Todd Gordon. I think he's constantly balled in with Paul Heyman, and comparing his charisma with Paul Heyman, it's impossible to overcome. So he gets, I guess, whitewashed that he is this boring guy, but he's not. Like, he shows he's pretty dynamic, and he finds a way to be eccentric in the ring, and good actor. I really thought he wanted to kill Alfonso. Maybe he did, but
yeah. I mean, I still want to. Yeah.
All right, so we open up with the match here. Mikey Whipwreck taking on Mike Norman. This is the first time we're seeing Mike Norman. I actually know Mike Norman. He works at the NYWC. So I did chat with Mike Norman. He's one of the guys maybe that potentially down the line will have him come on here, but I've had conversation with him. He's nice enough to talk about his time in ECW. He was talking about how he was enhancement talent. Why would you want me on the show? But I think he's someone who can quantify. He spoke about Paul Heyman I think I mentioned in the first episode where we talked about Paul Heyman as a leader. He signed off on that, saying Paul Heyman had a really unique way of getting people to feel a certain way, and you want to do anything for him. And I think that's, you know, having Mike Norman, you know, face to face right next to me talking about it, it resonated a little different than just reading about it.
No, for sure. But awesome. Paulie was the, you know, the leader of the pack, the guy that marched his troops right in the war. He could do anything with the way he spoke to people.
So like I mentioned, Mikey Whipwreck took on Mike Norman. He got the win, obviously, here. Mike Norman got an enormous amount of heat here. The announce crew talked about how he's a Desert Storm veteran, so that's like kind of his gimmick, but not really. But the ECW crowd from the beginning started chanting terrible things at Storm and Norman throughout the whole match. Couldn't really make out what they were saying, but they were just obviously all over him. And Mike Norman was getting on the turnbuckle and pointing at them and really feeding into the heat, which was awesome. Norman then continues to get a whole bunch of heat. I'm sure they were whispering to each other, like, continue the beat down, keep getting moves on me. And for a debut match, for an enhancement match, obviously Mikey's one of those guys who gets, he doesn't get a lot of offense in. We've seen a lot of offense in like matches against these other, you know, Valpuccio, he's kicking and punching. He got his ass beat in this match.
Yeah.
And Mike Norman put a hurting on him, and that's what get people really, really riled up. He was beating him up in the ring, out of the ring. You talked about it over and over again. This is Mikey's best role, where he's selling, he's making people sympathetic. He's making himself sympathetic towards these people.
Yeah, no, it really brings out that underdog quality for when he starts coming in with some offense or coming in with some defense into the match. Mikey is just so good to be the sympathetic character. It falls right into his character, his facials when he's getting his ass kicked. Like, oh, come on, man. Like, you really, he feels like that little guy that just can't get a fucking break. And I think that worked so well with them. And even here, like, you got this match. It's not really an important match, but you still, you're telling the story of Mikey Whipwreck throughout it, and you feel bad for the guy when he's getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, Mikey is about a couple weeks out from winning the world title. Spoiler alert, but this is a win here, but it's not an impressive win. He gets his ass beat the whole time. Mikey Whipwreck punches quick, hits a Franken Mikey for the 3 count, and that's the only offense he really got. 6 minutes and 43 seconds. It becomes what Whipwreck is really known for. Accidental offense kind of thing, where he leans into it and gets lucky and wins at the end of the match. And to me, that's when Whipwreck's at his best. Legendary stuff. Good opener too, because it got the crowd hot. Fresh off the Bill Alfonso thing, Norman took the heat. Mikey got the cheers. Great opener.
Hell yeah. Could not agree more.
All right, so I'll let you lead the way here. We have the tag titles on the line. The ECW Tag Team Champions, Raven and Stevie Richards, taking on the Broad Street Bully and Donnie Allen. It looks like it's going to be a squash match.
Yeah.
So you tell me about it.
Listen, it's got a little bit of legs on it for what it should have been. But yeah, it did look like a squash match. Stevie's making out. I love Joey Styles' commentary, or he's like, wow, he actually likes girls. Like, it's just fun, like little back and forth stuff. But none of that's going down because Buell comes out and starts cutting that shit right down the like. No, we're not doing this. Stevie's not catching any love, man. He's he gets a little kiss in, and then that's about it, man. Buell comes out, she starts breaking shit up. Raven are all over the place. Raven's doing his shtick where he's yelling at him, "Oh, shut the fuck up! Come on, get over here!" And like, you think it counted out? Who gets counted out in an ECW match? Raven and Stevie Richards do. But pandemonium. I mean, we had a bunch of shit going down afterwards. The Pitbulls came out. The Dudleys are out. It's just madness, absolute fucking madness.
6-on-6 brawl, as you mentioned, and most notably, Big Dick Dudley was no-selling Tommy Dreamer's punch and knocks Dreamer right on his butt. Tommy Dreamer gets a lot of love from the crowd. Obviously, Beulah and Francine continue to have a cat fight in the ring. Everybody is going all over the place. This is what a lot of people will say is the bad part about ECW, with the cat fights and the clothes falling off. But it works. It gets people excited, and people that are in the arena that are watching on TV or on tape, they like that. And yeah, Francine becomes a very pivotal character in this era, and this is her introduction. For the last couple of weeks, she's just Stevie's admirer. And for the life of me, I didn't know that. So it's kind of cool to see her growth from where it was to how important she really became.
Yeah, I mean, going down the line when she started pairing up with Shane Douglas, and like she becomes a very, very, very important part of ECW history, and awesome because she's a one of those girls that works like $1 million. She's got the looks. She knows how to get on the stick and make people hate her. It's so great, man.
Yeah. So the guys, just to be clear, outside the ring, the Dudley family, Dreamer, Stetson, Donnie Allen, Raven, and Richard. So they're all outside the ring. That's the brawl that's happening. The brawl better than the match, obviously. 2 minutes and 10 seconds. The match went. You mentioned too, this might have been the first count out we've seen in ECW, and it's par for the course now with Bill Alfonso. You're allowed to do these finishes because you could put the blame on the referees, and people weren't upset about the count out. Don't get me wrong. They usually are. People were more focused because the cat fight was happening in this brawl. People were more than satisfied with the second match of the evening.
100%, man. There was a lot of action going on. It was one of those things that you wish they had multi-cameras and stuff, because ECW is the one flaw that being in 1995, it's hard as hell to watch all the action at once.
So the next match here is really uneventful. The thing I guess we should talk about here, Val Puccio is the enormous man, 500 pounds, taking on Hack Myers. And let's just note, this is the exact same match that at Hardcore Heaven we saw between Big Mally and Hack Myers, to the point where it was worked the same way. Same finish, same flow, everything to the match was the same. Myers won accidentally by avoiding an elbow drop and laying his arm on Big Val. 6 minutes and 18 seconds. Horrible to make it go that long. Other than that, it's fine because, I guess I see the appeal of, and I get it. The fans that were watching the Big Mally match didn't see the Val Puccio match, but you're kind of exposed when you're doing the same finish, same match all together, back-to-back shows. I don't know. It left me wanting more, something different, I should say. 6 minutes and 18 seconds, waste of time.
I was going to say, what more could you have wanted out of that? Total waste of time. Yeah,
more as in not this.
Yeah, no, it was just meh. Like, it was there. It wasn't not terrible, but nothing great. Nothing pushing story. Nothing. It was just a match to have a match. Yeah.
So the next match, trying to redeem the shittiness of that 6 minutes and 18 seconds, we have Raven, Dudley, and Snot Dudley taking on the Pitbulls and Tommy Dreamer with Luna Vachon at her side. Somehow shorter than the match before, makes no sense, but Belcaster, break it down for us.
Yeah, and again, going right back to my last point, it is so hard to follow these matches where they are brawling all over the place. So you're kind of just sitting there looking at the ring, the fans going nuts and shit like that. But Bill Alfonso comes out halfway during the match and just, everything's got to go, Daddy. We got to turn it up. We got to turn it up, Daddy. I missed the whistle. That's the only thing I wish he had, because it would just be perfect. But it gets there, and and then it never goes away. So I'm kind of enjoying the time without the whistle. So Yeah, he starts over Pitbull. This is a clusterfuck match. It's just all over the place. Yeah, it was interesting that Pitbull's Tommy Dreamer and the Pitbulls win, right?
Pitbull actually
Maybe.
covered Snot for the win. Yeah, Pitbull's
There we go.
and
Yes.
Dreamer won. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like you mentioned, it really didn't matter. It was just absolute chaos where the win just happened randomly. Like Pitbull number 2 covered Snot after the super bomb. It ended weird, but there's not much wrestling that was going on because the Pitbulls are obviously involved and they're all over the place. And I guess most notably, if you're pulling away from this match, this is like the Dudleys are clearly something that is a huge plan they have in place. They have them in a huge focal point here. They want the Dudleys involved in the programming in some way. Obviously, Dudley and Snot Dudley are not your cream of the crop, but they are, obviously the Dudley gimmick, who I think Raven, I watched a shoot interview with Raven. He talked about how he watched the movie Slapshot and wants to do one of those sort of Slapshot inspired gimmick where obviously they do a whole bunch of, a take on it, but the glasses are straight from Slapshot.
100%. Yeah. And I remember that same shoot interview. So it's like Raven was just like, yeah, Slapshot's good movie. Put the glasses
the
on.
Raven voice, by the way, it is, and I know you've met Raven and worked with him personally. The Raven voice. If you guys have not heard Raven like talk, not cut a promo, it is
not in character, just is Scott Lee. It's whatever. Put the glasses on. I think you look great with the glasses. It'll be good. Like Slapshot's a good movie. Like he's kind of like a very smart version of Beavis and Butthead, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, damn it, do it, damn it.
If you guys are collectors and I was looking for authentic stuff on eBay, a lot of Raven shirts, ring used, are up there. So guys, check that out. Sabu has a lot of stuff up there too. So,
oh yeah,
just a thought out there. But your Raven impression is so goddamn spot on that it's freaky.
It's all right. I love it. No, it's the best. Yeah.
Let's go to the match that everyone was looking forward to. Eddie Guerrero and Taz with Paulie dangerously in their corner, taking on D. Malenko and 2 Cold Scorpio. So this match, everything you can want in an ECW match. We're finally getting Eddie and Dean Malenko back together in Japan, or from Japan. They missed the last show, which they were sorely missed because without them there, that hole for that hardcore wrestling fan, it's missing. Like you need these guys in there to hold the weight, to break up the monotony of a Hack Myers match, to break up the chaos of a Pitbull's match. You need them here, and it's missing. It's like making a salad, to use like food reference, like you would. It's like making a salad without having, salad dressing.
Without having the fucking lettuce. I mean, come on.
There you go, the lettuce. So a big piece of that in this match, and this match was cut down on the ECW home video. We had the version that was not cut down, so that was good for us. Cut down to about 8 minutes. So this is also, if you're looking for the whole match, it's also on the DVD ECW Unreleased Volume 1 that WWE released when they had all the rights to the video content. But yeah, man, this match, awesome. Starting out with a feeling out process with Malenko and Guerrero. It's like they can work in their sleep. These guys have seemingly gotten better over the course of time, maybe working in Japan together. Now they just know each other's moves. And maybe it's a breath of fresh air too, because it's coming straight off the last 2 matches that we just saw, seeing D. Malenko and Eddie go in the ring. It's like watching 2 absolute magicians at work, making people just react to every small thing in the ring. And just shows the talent. A back suplex from D. Malenko to Eddie Guerrero, it's a little different than a back suplex from Hack Myers to Donnie Allen. It just shows like even the small things, like locking up, it's done with precision and poise, and it means something. And that's this whole match.
No, absolutely. This is a love letter to the best wrestling that came through ECW. I mean, this is awesome. This is so fun. And I mean, you got a group of stellar ass performers here. I mean, like, there's nothing that could possibly go wrong. These guys could sit there and fucking do a thumb wrestling and it would be amazing.
This reminds me a lot of the Elite in the Death Triangle, where they just go absolutely a sprint, where they just know they're going to be going certain amount of time, and they'll rest when they're in the back. They just completely go with no rest holds. It's, go to some of these spots here. Eddie hitting a Uranagi and the Hilo. Malenko breaks up a chin lock with a back suplex. They immediately tag Taz. Malenko escapes a headlock and drop kicks the knee. Scorpio now takes over, wrenches Taz's knee really, really well. Taz gets up, delivers a T-bone, tags to Malenko. He applies that awesome sleight of hand style twisted knee bar, which is really, really cool to watch. And then it gets really, really crazy. Scorpio, a powerbomb from Scorpio to Taz, and then a huge flying splash. He decides not to go for the pin, tags Malenko for more of the knee work, and then Taz breaks free, tries to tag Guerrero as he hits Malenko with a tilt-a-whirl, which was really awesome for a nice 2 count. And then they fight over a suplex, which was a cool spot. Something we see a lot today. And Guerrero wins the battle with a brain buster where his head just absolutely hit the floor. Frog splash. Everybody thought the match was over. Wasn't. Really good near fall. I'm a big sucker for near falls when they make me believe. This is one of the cases. And then going to the end in here, Scorpio heads up to the top. Paulie hits the phone over his head. Half Nelson Tazplex on Scorpio. He gets the 3. The match goes full run, 19 minutes and 17 seconds. This is the perfect use of time. But when you think it's over, Bill Alfonso comes out. He says, Paulie, you can't interfere. This is ridiculous. If he had a whistle, he'd blow it. And Taz then takes a super kick from Scorpio and then Tiger Bomb from Malenko. And then Fonzie comes in, counts the 3 count for the double pinfall. Official time, 20 minutes and 17 seconds. Another minute goes by. And now the crowd is desperate. They want 911 to come out to just beat the shit out of Alfonso, I should say. I'm getting his name wrong. That's how badly I want his ass beat. And just an absolute blast. Maybe I would have saved the shitty ending. Maybe. Like it wasn't terrible, but maybe I wouldn't have used it. I get why they did it, but it was very similar to the Taz 2 Cold Scorpio at Hardcore Heaven finish. I was like, you know what? Why are you doing it again? But
it just
can't complain.
Just to piss everybody off. That's why.
I guess, yeah.
But no, this was like you said, this is a love letter to all things great about pro wrestling. Everything was so good. Going through these old matches, I miss the way Taz wrestles so bad, and like watching him again, it just makes me so happy. Like it really does. Like Taz was one of those things that was so captivating, watching him suplex people left and right, and it's just the best. And everybody in the damn match worked so hard, and it was so good. Everything about the whole thing was fantastic.
And the other crazy thing that I looked at this too, and we mentioned before, no rest holds, but when you read it back and think about what happened, it feels like when you're cranking the knee that would be a rest hold, but it's actually, it's not, because the difference between a rest hold where a guy's catching his breath with a side headlock on the ground just to pass the time is much different than a strategic knee lift and cranking the leg where you have Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko making the faces that feels very, very meaningful. Like I mentioned before, everything they do in the ring has such meaning and poise. Or even watch the way these dudes lock up. Watch the way they tighten it in. You could tell that it's another level from everybody else on this card. Another level from guys that we watch every day.
Yeah.
The mechanics, the absolute attention to detail from not just Malenko and Guerrero, but you mentioned Taz before and Too Cold. These guys went out there and they tore the house down. It's a shame on the home video it was only 8 minutes. I'm not sure exactly why they chose to do that. Wow. But nevertheless, we got to see the full match, 19 minutes or 20 minutes and change. An absolute blast from start to finish. And this is what was missing from that Hardcore Heaven card. We didn't have this, which the show suffered for.
Yeah, no, and you see why this absolutely makes up for any suffering we've had to deal with throughout this whole show. Like this really made up for the earlier shit in the card that was like, and even the later shit that's like, which we will get to that next. But it was amazing, man, absolutely amazing.
And when you compare a match like this to a Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega match where those guys absolutely tore the house down at Wrestle Kingdom, and it's just different when guys are in the ring and they are just motivated to better themselves, where like you could tell at Wrestle Kingdom, Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, whatever time zone you're watching in, where Ospreay and Omega, where they were competing with themselves in the ring, not maybe even competing with other people on the card. They wanted to be better than Jay White and Okada. And you could tell all 4 guys in this ring, Malenko, Too Cold, Eddie, and Taz, all wanted to be better than the last and be the person that someone's talking about as they leave the arena. Yeah. And I think that just makes everybody better. And they just up the ante every time out, which is why you see these moments and the future moments we get from every guy involved. And, it's like you said, it's a love letter to wrestling. And if you like wrestling, how do you not love this? This is everything and more.
Yeah. No, if you showed us to any person that's not a fan of wrestling, or they're like one of those part-time watchers, like, yeah, I watch, once in a while. This should be the shit that lights the fire underneath the fandom. This is the beautiful shit we get out of pro wrestling. This is why we love the sport so much.
And a guy like Eddie combines the best parts of lucha with the technical side of wrestling from Japan. And he's the perfect mesh up of those guys. And I still believe to this day, you show any casual fan or even a person that doesn't watch wrestling, you expose them to lucha, go down to AAA with Io Del Vikingo. That guy is unfreaking believable, the things he can do. Even a guy in GCW and all over the place, he's in PWG as well, Commander.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you watch that, and I understand there's a certain lack of psychology when you're waiting for planches and you have to suspend belief. But at the end of the day, that's what wrestling is. It's suspended belief. And you have to have an air of believability. But at the end of the day, running into the ropes, going off the top rope, all of that stuff, you have to suspend belief because it makes sense in the wrestling world. That's why, to me, lucha and technical wrestling will always be my favorite and always, for me, be more captivating for someone who doesn't watch wrestling.
100%, man. Yes,
all right,
to all the above.
Let's go to the after segment. Paul Lee and Bill Alfonso were trading on the mic. They were going back and forth. We talk about it all the time. The audio is absolute dog shit, so it's really hard to hear. You can imagine what they're saying. You can hear the cadence of Bill Alfonso's voice, where he's getting higher and he's getting angry. But Rob Feinstein, the ECW videographer, got involved. He hit Paul Lee with a decent punch. When he puts his hands on him, Fonzie helps Feinstein trip up Paul Lee, and then we get him. 911's dialed. He appears. Instead of running for his life, Feinstein stands up to him. Of course, the dude gets the monster choke slam, and Fonzie barely escapes as he makes out of the ring. He survives another week without someone getting his hands on. They're passing it down. They're building up that tension. But 911, we saw a choke slam, and he's getting more and more over every week.
No, it was a great choke slam too. RF video quality choke slam. See what he did there?
Yes.
It's good stuff.
Absolutely.
So yeah, unbelievably good. And I was shocked at how good Feinstein actually took that choke slam. So I mean, it was a very nice little segment, man. Not quite Fonzie getting choke slammed, but it was beautiful, and we were this close, man. This close.
So for all of the good superlatives I threw at that other match, here is the match for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. And again, let's keep another tally. Not in the main event. The World Championship booked like a mid-card title. And how could it not be? The Sandman with Woman in his corner taking on AXL Rotten. Lead us through here. There's not much to break down about the match. We know who gets the win. We know AXL's not going to be our new world champion, but oof, this was a rough one.
It was a rough one. Like I said, though, Sandman is a little bit more in his element here, where he does look like a star, and it's not hard to look like a star when you're sitting with the darkness that is AXL Rotten. But it was nothing worth watching. Like this could have been left off the card. Nobody would have noticed. I think you could have, again, fill in the blank with Sandman. Just have him come out there smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer with a kendo stick. Have him just plummet somebody for 10 minutes, because that's would have been amazingly better than this was. Some back and forth. AXL, and Sandman just kind of going at each other with whatever they can. Barbed wire. Sandman's shirt was ripped for a while. It was a very disgusting watch, and that's saying a lot after Sal Buccio was just out in the ring. But yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it didn't do much for either guy. It was like a match just to have the match. AXL Rotten has no place in the heavyweight title picture. So it was just what do we get? Sandman, of course, wins, because goddamn, if they put the title on AXL Rotten, that would have just been over.
So it was not the best version of it, but it was a rocker dropper from, I would call it a flying rocker dropper for the win.
It was
he stumbles onto Rotten for the win, and whatever. But the one interesting part, if this was like, if FanDuel was around and you had prop bets and you're like, all right, let's place money on over-under on will there be blood in this match with Sandman and AXL Rotten, you'd be like, man, pound me over. There's going to be blood on both guys. Neither one of them bled, which is
weird. Like, there was barbed wire, and like it was a weird just a weird match.
It was when you have AXL Rotten, who his whole he was bleeding when he came to the ring against Ian in all those matches, and Sandman makes himself bleed when he's coming to the ring most times. Neither one of these guys bled, and I'm sure the ECW arena, as we all were confused why Axel's getting a title shot. We're confused by all of it.
Yes, but the next match makes up for it. So it's just we'll skip right over that. The rest sweep that one under the rug, kid.
All right, so it's the first of two cage matches, and the first one being Stevie versus Luna Vachon. This is what we talked about with the influence that GCW has from ECW. This is Luna Vachon being painted in a light that she, and I know Stevie's looked at as a comic relief character, and maybe not so much as we move towards him being a competitor. He is a tag team champion. He holds a championship in ECW, but this match, not really long, 7 minutes and 47 seconds, but they use the cage to be bashed, as a weapon. So, Stevie's face bashing into the side of the cage. Stevie immediately bleeds, so they get, their blood that they want. In the first minute, we get a bulldog and swinging neck breaker, sets up a splash on the cage for 2, and then Luna pulls Stevie up on the mat. Then Stevie finally gets it going where he's putting the hurting on Luna, where, he hit a power bomb, he hog ties her in a hold, and then now Luna's busted open, which again, very similar to GCW, where, we watch Ali Catch and Yamashita and Dark Sheik. These women go out there and they tear it up with the men in the ring. This was akin to that. Richard's trying the snooker splash off the top of the cage. Luna brings her boot up to block. Cage is smaller, by the way. This is not the WWF cage. This cage is really tiny.
Yeah.
So
this is your indie cage with a little more class, a lot less zip ties. Yeah.
And then the ending, so Luna splashing Stevie again after that spot, and then gives him the testicular claw where he was forced to tap out. And I want to talk about realism. Stevie sat there and let her crush his testicles in her hand, not trying to get her off, whatever. But after the match is when the fun starts. 6-on-6 brawl starts and spills inside the cage. Tommy Dreamer comes out, and then obviously him and Raven can't stop, and they have to fight. And then Raven, he gets handcuffed. So if you guys ever seen an ECW compilation package, I'm sure you have.
Oh yeah.
There's a moment, and this is it, where it is the chair shot heard round the world, where Raven is handcuffed to the cage, and Tommy Dreamer gets everything into that chair shot, months of frustration right across the bow of Raven's head, and bent the chair over his head to, you can hear the ECW audience kind of gasp. And this is actually interesting because of all the violence, all the chaos they've seen. Nothing really gets people to react like the sound in a quiet arena when a chair shot rattles off someone's head. And that was the case here.
Yeah, no, listen, it's still just as brutal, if not more brutal to this day. Just a lot of wincing, just, oh my God, how do they do that? And, Raven and Dreamer obviously having the feud of a lifetime here. But crazy. I think that's one of the worst chair shots to ever be taken by anybody. And Raven took it so damn well. She's like, just fucking hit me. Come on, man. Get it over with.
And you can circle this moment here as one of the pivotal moments to make Tommy Dreamer who he is. And obviously the yes, sir, may I have another moment where he becomes hardcore and the fans accept him. That's one of them. But this moment might be what ECW fans, hardcore fans, would remember him for. And why not, man? This moment was everything and more. It lived up because it is just an epic moment that stands the test of time. It's just as brutal as it was when it happened in July 1995.
Hell yeah.
And then after that, Dreamer gets into the crowd. He joins the fans to celebrate. A nice reprieve from what was not a good match. And it's not the fault of Stevie and Luna, because I'm sure they could go. It was just I don't know. They weren't afforded the story in the match. And I know they were trying to tell Stevie as being this weakling, but I think it would have been better if Stevie would have had a little bit more heat. He did a little bit, hit the power bomb, and he got some offense in. I think Luna should have been, a little bit more back and forth, more than 7 minutes and 47 seconds. When you have a cage match, I don't think you think it's going to go less than 10.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, that was the most shocking thing about it. Who's like, oh shit, But I mean, they make good use of it because they keep the cage up for the spray paint match that we're gonna get.
spray paint match. But yeah, so you led right into it. The cage match between Public Enemy and the Gangstas. This is the second match in their run here. Obviously, the Gangsters made their debut, taking Public Enemy to task, beating them up, leaving them for dead in the ring. New Jack and Mustafa, they're a breath of fresh air in this division.
Yeah.
Tag titles inexplicably not involved somehow, but lead us through this cage match, Belcaster. 14 minutes and 28 seconds of she said what?
Yeah. It was all over the place. Really hard to kind of keep your attention because of the cage being there. I mean, you're just watching one guy stand up at one part of the ring, throw something, hit a move, and then it goes back into what am I looking at here? But we did get probably one of the worst double table spots I think I've ever seen in history. I mean, New Jack's not even laying on the fucking top of it. The Rocco, I don't even know which one, but Rocco Rock, it does that crazy backflip. Yeah, takes most of his knees through the fucking table. They're both Rocco Rock at this point. It's like Pitbull 1 and 2. But yeah, just some really, really fucking sketchy spots. Like you said, breath of fresh air to have the Gangsters here and in all their glory. But yeah, Mustafa, they do that double stack of tables. I was wincing more than I was at the fucking this spot than I was the chair shot from earlier, because it was like, what are they doing? Like it's one of those things where you click, you're like, what are you doing? Get the fuck on the table.
And they had trouble with the debut of the Gangsters with the table too, where the table broke when he laid on it, and they still splashed him anyway. Like, fuck it, we were already here, let's just do it. So
yeah. So New Jack obviously makes his grunge against tables very, very here on out. He's just breaking them left and right. Fuck these tables. But yeah, it was a weird, just a clusterfuck of a match. Mustafa sprayed something in Grunge's eyes, maybe spray paint. Maybe maybe that was the lost can of spray paint. They found it. They're like, shit, we could have did this the whole time. But yeah, it was just a clusterfuck of a match. Public Enemy Gangsters it was a fun end of the match or end of the pay-per-view show. It was just there. It was crazy.
I'm sure at the time people probably enjoyed it with the cookie sheets and the chairs and the windows, skillets. It had all the ingredients for what would be a fun ECW match. But I would say by watching this match, you really appreciate the fact that Public Enemy and the Gangstas, in their style of matches, when they're doing their best, they can travel around the arena and use the accessories of the arena, whether it be a New Jack stage dive, which he wasn't quite doing yet, or going through tables, or taking stuff from the fans. They were limited here where they couldn't do this. The other thing I was interested in, I mentioned I was watching Raven shoots, but I'm also watching a lot of New Jack shoots, which, man, if you guys want to dive deep on YouTube and listen to New Jack go in about certain topics, I was mostly looking for his opinion on Public Enemy, which was non-existent. He really didn't talk about them, but he did say some mean things about Mustafa, which I thought he would be like, oh, we broke in together. SMW was our home. And I think he would, one of the quotes he said is like, my mama can do the gimmick you're doing, so it doesn't matter. I'm New Jack. So, and then talks about how when he moved on to be it by himself, it was a blessing. So Mustafa has some interviews. I don't know exactly what he's saying. He's not clearly as interesting as the New Jack stuff, but dude, this is fun. This is fun shit. It just didn't play as well as it probably could have. And I think it's just because our expectations get raised, because when you're watching New Jack, you're expecting everything a New Jack match brings, but we're not quite there yet. New Jack hasn't become New Jack in ECW.
No, absolutely. And I think production is a big problem for these kind of matches, especially because it's just that one, it's the house cam. It is the one cam that just, you're looking at the whole arena, and it's impossible to like get the really nice, like good, like up close, like we see in cage matches nowadays. I mean, GCW could do a cage match. They'll at least have 2-3 camera guys. Like it's hard to kind of judge when the views, when you're not watching the whole fucking thing like up close and personal. So, but it is still very entertaining. Nothing taking away from it. It was what you would expect from a Public Enemy versus Gangsters match. Maybe a little less violent than you would expect too. I mean, even with all the weapons they had, it was just fun little watch, man.
So Rocco Rock gets stretchered out by doctors. They're really selling it up. It's kind of hard to believe after, because like they do so much crazier stuff, as you mentioned. It wasn't like they didn't take risks. They did. There was a lot of risky stuff in this match. But at the end of the day, I don't know, left me wanting more. I definitely, it was better than a spray paint match. But as far as cage matches go,
we'll never know if it was better than a spray paint match.
That's true. Maybe like the cage, all right, follow me here for a second. Maybe the cage match and other promotions is used as the be all end all, where it's supposed to end feuds. 80s, early 90s, it was like, all right, we've been feuding for a while, let's put them in a cage. I think with ECW, a cage is just not as hardcore as everything else that's going on. 100%. So it's hard to ever live up because cage is just there. But every match, it should be the culmination of the blow off for a feud, but it's just another match in ECW. And that's when you're challenging yourself to how can we make this as brutal as possible? Eventually we get fire involved, all that stuff, but it's really hard to top yourself.
Yeah, no, and absolutely very well put too. I mean, you can't, I mean, the cage is just a prop at this point in ECW. That's exactly, it's no greater than a chair. It's no greater than, a frying pan handed to you by, Joe Schmo in the front row or the hat guy. Yeah, like it's weird shit, but it does take away from that. And you would think that it wouldn't. And we don't see a lot of cage matches in ECW either. Like very little cage matches in ECW compared to like what you would be seeing on, WWF or WCW later on. It's just, it's a weird thing, probably for the better. Right, somebody was gonna die. Rocco Rock's knees are completely shot. That's why he got stretchered out. His knees went through 2 tables. It was devastating.
Yeah,
it was brutal. But yeah, it was still a fun match. Like I said, it didn't do anything. It was there. Gangsters look great, but yeah, it was just there.
It reminds me of movesets, and we see the Canadian Destroyer get spammed on every indie we see, and obviously AEW, they're doing the Destroyer as not even a near fall at this point. It's just a setup move. But when you watched Impact back in the day with Petey Williams, and he was doing the Destroyer, or when Amazing Red broke out the Destroyer, or any of those early guys, it was insane to see. Even go back to Jake the Snake Roberts, when he hit the DDT, match was over. Yep. And that was a devastating thing. Or even the pile driver before it was being spammed. I think at any point, and this is true to any ecosystem that becomes in wrestling, when you're in AEW or WWE or at the time ECW, you live in this bubble where certain things become good enough to end matches or just set up moves or just transition moves. The case in point here, a cage match here, like we mentioned before, is just a prop. It's not going to be one of those things that people even pop for. It's not going to draw an extra rating because it's a cage, because it's just a cage where like someone could bring a piece of a cage into the arena and pass it out to the wrestlers, and it's going to have the same damage to it. And that's the environment they're creating. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It just becomes evident that ECW is constantly going to be chasing their tail, trying to up themselves. And it's almost becoming an impossibility. That's why we see tax, we see fire, we see glass, we see things that eventually you're going to cap out where fans are numb to it. And that's why the deathmatch scene, it's hard to get past doing the things you're doing. I mean, where else can you go from carving someone's head with a knife? Where else can you go?
Yeah.
In a realistic sense. Yeah.
You really pin yourself into, a corner, and there's no way to get out of it, because it's like, do you, I think somebody said it about New Jack, but it's like, where does he go from here? Is it like, of course he's stabbing people in the fucking crowd. Like, it's like, now that's where it led to. He's beating the piss out of like old wrestlers, because where there's like, once you reach the ceiling, how much further up can you go? Like, there's no way in hell. And it became the downfall of it all too. And that's what really pigeonholed them into like, oh, well, if New Jacks can jump off, how much higher can New Jack go? What balcony can you fucking possibly, like, soon he's gonna be hanging off the rafters and falling off, and we've seen that too. Like, it's insane, man.
No, it's a good point. And I think, GCW does a good job of making their matches feel different, similar to ECW, where we mentioned before, Speedball, Mike Bailey, Jordan Oliver, Nick Wayne, Blake Christian, they go out and they have these matches. I'm not saying their talent's comparable to Eddie Guerrero, but they are setting the pace where they are making sure that you're pleasing different people in the crowd. but they also have similar things and things to overcome with the death matches and the matches that call for doors and light tubes. Eventually, where do you go from that in those matches? And fans in that environment, they accept what it is. They
Yeah.
accept that the light tubes are not going to always end a match unless it's like you put the light tubes in right next to his head and then you knee him in the head. That could end the match. So my point being is that, I don't know, different promotions have to pace themselves and learn from what ECW was doing, because when you kind of blow your load in a July with all these things, like a cage match is never going to sell. Like it's never going to draw more people. And eventually you're going to have to light people on fire, and that's where they go. And like, that's why, because where else do you go for these bloodthirsty fans?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, you take away the spectacle of the spectacle. Like you're just dudes in a ring beating the piss out of each other for the sake of beating the piss out of each other. It's no fun. Like there's GCW does it where when they do the cage match with the
the Art of War games they did,
like they do it in a way where it's still a spectacle. It's still something like, holy shit, like these guys are crazy. You believe it a little bit more. Here, it's almost takes away the belief because shit, I'll try anything once, right? Like as you so beautifully said one time, $20 is $20, man. ECW is $20, man.
Yeah, I also you can compare this, to go down the rabbit hole for a sec, with AEW with 5-star matches, and wrestling's inundated with matches that are 4.75 5-star matches. I guarantee Ospreay and Omega is going to get close to 7 from Dave Meltzer. When you can watch that type of wrestling on your local indie show and on GCW. I mean, like I said, Jordan Oliver and Nick Wayne tearing it up every single night, doing things that you would never see in wrestling in the 90s. Never. These guys are more talented, more athletic, faster, training harder, with more technology to access, dieting, like all this stuff, understanding the effects it has on your body and rehab. And it's for wrestling today, more than ever, we have an inundation of quality wrestling. And that, it seems like it's a crazy thing to say, but it's almost like when every match is really good, even the really good matches don't seem as good, because like the separation isn't as thin. When a lot of the average matches are 3.5 stars and a really good match is 5 stars, the gap is, back in 1995, a 5-star match, the average match was like 1.752 when you're watching shitty matches in 1995. That's why it's really, AEW has a hard time pleasing everybody, because it's so good all the time. And I know people don't like to hear that. The wrestling is so good all the time that it's hard to top it the next week. Like, what else did the Death Triangle and the Elite have to do in match number 7? Like, what does the ladder match have to do to please people? It's gonna please me, but I'm saying for the fan that watches, like, what could they do to be better than match 6?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And wrestling's going to hit a hard point in general. That, it's everything can't be so amazing all the time, or else it does. Like if Michael Jordan went out there and fucking played against Michael Jordan every night, nobody would give a shit. They'd be like, wow, these guys can do some cool stuff, like, great. But where are you going with it? And that's exactly what it is. Wrestling is becoming the weapon.
Exactly. Poetic right there. And and I think that's a lot of the arguments that people have on different shows, where back in the day, if you were doing something in your match that was similar to a finish that you'd be doing, people would get upset, and rightfully so. And I remember a Jim Cornette argument, someone was making an argument with Jim Cornette, and he used this example where they wanted to do a spot in a match, which was the same as later in the night. The same exact spot was going to put someone on a stretcher, and then everybody had to like kind of hope this person's okay, but they want to do it as a near fall in their match. So if you're going to kick someone in the throat in your match and do a near fall, and it's going to hospitalize somebody else, it doesn't make any sense. So you have to really think about the show in context, where, I go back to All Out. The freaking pre-show had matches that were, Eddie Kingston versus Ishii. That match was incredible. Would have been the best match on any other card. It was on the pre-show. Yeah. And I don't know, is too much wrestling that's a debate in itself.
Absolutely.
Can wrestling be too good on one card?
Yeah. And a match like Eddie Kingston and Ishii could have headlined any fucking pay-per-view a year ago, 2 years ago, now it's It's on the opener. Like,
Yeah,
you
now it's
guys
on
are
zero.
opening for Danhausen in the fucking Best Friends. Like, that's what it is. And it's like they all do great shit, but it's, I mean, how many colors are you gonna paint in one picture? You gotta tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm not saying what the right answer is. And just like we went on this tangent because it's so relatable. Where
Yeah.
ECW with the weapons and AEW and not just AEW, wrestling at large. It's just like the fan base is so knowledgeable and so understanding of what match quality is that you have to, on an independent show in front of 500 people, maybe less than that, take out all the stops or they won't leave entertained. They're going to be,
Yeah.
you know, especially here in the Northeast, like there's so much exposure to what good wrestling is that these guys, and it makes them better because competition does breed success. But at the same time, it's hard to, you know, to step up every single week and go 16 to 20 minutes with destroyers and planches and 450s in a match where back in the day, you didn't have to do that to entertain fans.
No, it was headlock, suplex, you know, run the ropes, headlock, suplex. Now it's fucking everything. You literally throw every single piece of what they can do out of their repertoire at you, which I think it just hurts the business all in a whole, because you can't, like, as you were saying, you know, the throat kick. You can't do that when it's going to take somebody out. You gotta be the guy that sits at the curtain going, all right, did anybody do a T-bone suplex tonight? No, cool. I get to go do my shit. Or if, oh fuck, you know, they did it in two of the 4 matches that happened so far. Like I gotta switch my shit around. Like, you gotta pay attention to the product in full. But like nowadays, you're never gonna see that because it's always everybody wants got to get their shit in. Like,
Yeah.
that is it. Like, everybody's got to get their shit in, and like Petey Williams is like, I think when Buff Bagwell did the Canadian Destroyer on his big return, like Petey Williams was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I would feel the same way. It's just like, what do you do? Like, if everybody could do it, then where's the specialty of it? Like, you know, if everybody can make pizza, why would there, you know, why is there New York? Why is there, you know, Chicago? Like, just make it a conglomerate. Like, if everybody could go be Walmart, man. Like, it's crazy.
Well, that's the beauty of, like, sometimes in the simplicity of wrestling in WWE's landscape with, you know, I go back to Big Show during that one run where a punch was the most knockout thing that you could do, or even like Chris Masters with the full Nelson as the master lock. You can go with the World's Strongest Slam with Mark Henry, where it's literally just, he pulls a guy up and slams him down. But with certain guys, I guess with the logic of wrestling, certain moves are more detrimental to your health from different guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, if John Cena does the attitude adjustment or somebody else does a DVD, if Mark Merrow does the DVD, it's a different effect because John Cena's higher on the hierarchy. And I think that's, like, in my brain, that's where all these things live, where this match could end because he did it, and this guy can't end it with this because he never did. I don't know. We're going down a rabbit hole.
No, absolutely. But I totally get where you're going with it, though. You know, Shawn Michaels had legs of steel. That's why the super kick was so
exactly
such a big deal. But when the Young Bucks do it,
leg drop. Everybody else, they'd be leg drops elsewhere, right? You know, Earthquake would hit leg drop. It wouldn't end the match. He'd have to hit, you know, the sitting down, whatever you call it, I don't know the fuck. What did Earthquake call his move? He sat on someone's chest. He broke Hogan's chest cavity, guys. Come on.
Anyway.
Oh
man, yeah.
All right, let's go to the chaser. We're gonna pick our favorite part of Heatwave Rage in the Cage 1995. All right, here we are. The chaser, Mike Belcaster. You know the event, you know the matches. What was your favorite part from July 15th, 1995 in Philadelphia?
It was the idea that there was going to be a spray paint match, right? Now I want to see it. I hope that's what they do in this trios title tournament. I hope somebody busts out the spray paint can. That's what we're going for. No, all serious. My favorite part of the night was Dean Malenko, Too Cold Scorpio versus Eddie Guerrero and Taz. I mean, that's the best of everything. That was 4 Michael Jordans in the ring at once, and it did not get old.
Absolutely. I would obviously, that's my favorite match. I was gushing over it before, but I'm also going to go with the significance historically with the Tommy Dreamer chair shot heard around the world for what it did to both careers, not only just Tommy Dreamer, but what it did for Raven and their feud. And that was the exclamation point on what has been brewing as what would be a good feud. I think it took it from good to great, and it only got better from there. And that was the moment where people circle, especially in a rivalry that goes years and years and years. People can look at that moment as one of the best moments between the two. And that says something because they had a lot of really, really good moments between the two of them.
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, it was still just as deadly today as it was back then, if not more so, because we know so much about how bad chair shots were to the human body. But yeah, I mean, it was such a pivotal moment in that feud of theirs. Really set things to a more serious tone, and Tommy Dreamer finally got his payback to Raven a little bit, and it was beautiful. You don't really get better wrestling storytelling than these two guys had.
Yeah, and we also have the emergence of a really important character in ECW, so that can't be dismissed either. This isn't her debut. She's been around for the last 2 shows or 3 shows where she's being Stevie's admirer, but she's a huge influence on, like you mentioned before, Shane Douglas's career later on, and she's a huge character for the women in ECW, and this is how it started for her.
Yeah, no, huge part in ECW, and it's cool to see her come out of the crowd, just being there, and just the little infancy that it is. I love it.
All right, it's time for us to close the tab. It's my birthday. I got to go out and celebrate. I'm 34 years old. I gotta blow out the candles, but first we gotta close out the bar, man. We gotta pay the bartenders, tip our bartenders, and say goodbye and get ready for next week.
dancing until he's 35. That's what he's doing.
All right, so next week's show will be episode 9 of season 2. It will come to you on January 13th, 2023. We are reviewing 2 shows. Originally, it was supposed to be Gangsta's Paradise by itself, but we're going to be doing ECW WrestlePalooza 1995 and Gangsta's Paradise. So WrestlePalooza, to put some contacts in there for you, it's the first WrestlePalooza event that was produced by ECW. Took place on August 5th in Philly. And 4 of the matches from WrestlePalooza you guys will be able to see. We'll review them also from Hardcore TV. So if you guys want to go out and watch them, I'm not sure if WrestlePalooza is on Peacock, but August 15th, August 22nd, episodes of ECW Hardcore TV include the full lot of matches, so you guys can check that out. But the matches that we're going to be checking out, the main event was a stretcher match, the Gangstas taking on Public Enemy, Mikey Whipwreck and the Sandman in a Singapore cane match. Too Cold, D. Malenko and Cactus Jack took on Eddie Guerrero and the Steiner Brothers in a 6-man tag match. Raven, Stevie Richards, and the Dudley Brothers, which is Big Dick, Dudley, took on Tommy Dreamer. And then we have Cactus Jack and the Pitbulls in an 8-man tag match as well. So that's all the stuff we're going through. But of course, that's not where we're stopping, dude. We're going to go to Gangsta's Paradise, which is huge because it's the debut of Stunning Steve Austin, Psychosis, and Rey Mysterio, all who go on to different things in the late 90s in the WWF, WCW. I don't know if you guys are watching this, clearly you guys know who those guys are. The name of the event, I mentioned the number 1 song in the world, 1995. It's in reference to the Gangsta's Paradise song, which was released the prior month. And the Gangstas are a tag team were scheduled to be competing in the main event. And Gangsta's Paradise was used in the TV commercial spot on the video for ECW Hardcore TV. I'm sure that Coolio didn't get a dime from Paul Heyman, but it's, sign of the times. Gangsta's Paradise was a jam back in the. I had that on cassette. I remember
hell yeah!
It was a clear purple cassette.
It doesn't get any better than that, right?
So some of the matches here in Gangsta's Paradise, they were obviously airing on Hardcore TV. The full event released on VHS the same year. And the bout between Psychosis and Rey Mysterio is one of the matches that Rey Mysterio circles as like really his entree into becoming the superstar in WCW and WWF. So it's a really important match we're going to be reviewing as far as significance goes. And Psychosis is still, he's gangsta as well. He's so good. So it's really awesome to see. We had a lot of these matches from Gangsta's Paradise were included elsewhere. So I'm really excited to get into it. But as we say goodbye on this Friday, Mike Belcaster. What's going on the rest of the week? Obviously, you guys did a great job on the wrap-up reviewing that new Dynamite look. Mike Mansuri.
Oh my goodness!
Full disclosure, I'm not sure if it's good or bad, so I don't want to give my opinion yet. But
it's the best. It's really, I mean, it's the best stage setup you could ever ask for. No, I'm looking forward to seeing all that. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Obviously, your birthday, huge deal, man. Happy birthday again from everybody down at the tavern. We all love you, pal. It's a good time, and I hope you have a great day, dude. It's gonna be fucking fun. 34, it comes and goes, right? But yeah, we did a great fig night. We reviewed our top 5 figures each of the 2022. So we each put all of our thinking caps on, like they do in Blue's Clues, and we got our figures out and kind of like pinpointed which ones we liked the best and which ones we didn't like so much. It was a fun time, really good episode. So yeah, go check all that fun shit out.
So guys, you can also find me on Wrestling Tonight Monday with the one bad Chad. We're going to be reviewing the weekend news to get you guys primed for the week after. We're going to talk about everything that went on. I'm sure we're going to be talking about Mercedes. We're going to be talking about Wrestle Kingdom, AEW, previewing match number 7 in the Trios series for the Trios Championship. We also have Shot Nostalgia next week, like I mentioned. Honor Society going to be coming back soon, myself and Colton. So you guys, Colton, who's become a fixture on the debate, he'll be involved with Honor Society in a big way with myself, reviewing Ring of Honor Weekly TV. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And we also have coming up for actually following the episode next week, I'm going to be interviewing a local wrestler named Osito. So I think I might have the graphic here that I want to share for you guys. I do. So Osito is going to be joining me, the Culture Bear, January 13th, the Visits the Tavern. So it's going to be airing. The audio is going to be dropping on the ACEFIELD Retro channel. The video is going to be on both channels. But Osito is one of those wrestlers who's very exciting. He hails from Coney Island. So you guys see the Wonder Wheel in the background. He's a guy who's very, very excited. I'm looking forward to talking with him. He's competed in remarkable wrestling. I'm all over the Northeast. He's been doing a lot of good stuff. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him. And let me just show you the graphic for Gangsta's Paradise as well. This is you see Stunning Steve right there. You see the young Rey Mysterio. Yeah.
Raven, very distasteful in the corner over there.
He's not happy.
No.
I had to make that Gangsta's Paradise logo myself, by the way.
It looks great. I absolutely love it, man.
Couldn't find the logo. Couldn't find the logo.
It's okay. Paulie probably can't find it anymore.
But Mike Belcaster, this was a pleasure, man. I know we're 8 minutes before the bell, but you know what? Sometimes the ball rolls like that, and we gotta, we'll get out of here early. We'll let these bartenders get home to their families. Let everybody start their weekend off the right way. This is always a pleasure, man. I'm looking forward to getting into the rest of this season in WWF 1998.
I'm so looking forward to it, man. What a way to kick off 2023 down here at the Turnbuckle Tavern. We hope you guys have a great fucking weekend. I guess Paulie's, and ladies and gentlemen, Too Cold Scorpio is one of the best wrestlers in ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling. Guys, have a great night.
We love you, Too Cold Scorpio. Come on the show.
Yeah.